1 year ago tonight, ITV closed their CITV channel, all but completely exiting the kids' TV market after decades. CITV started in 1983 as a block on ITV and has been a household name for many years afterwards, giving us shows like Puddle Lane, Danger Mouse, Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends, Count Duckula, The Gingerbread Man, Wizardora, Bernard's Watch, and many, many more, as well as airing a large selection of imports from overseas, including He-Man, The Real Ghostbusters, Tasmania, Tiny Toon Adventures, Animaniacs, Hey Arnold, Pokemon, Digimon, Sonic X, and if I listed them all, we'd be here all night. The original video I did last year on CITV and its closure was a bit of a last-minute rush, and there are a few things I missed, and I forgot that Bob the Fish, who did that ITV in the Face series, has another series, The Kids Are Alright, covering kids TV in the UK, and has an edition covering CITV and its predecessors. I watched it, and watched it again for this follow-up video to what I did last year, and it turns out ITV did have a kids block sometime in their first few years called The Toddler's Truce, and over the years since, and even when they had CITV predecessor Watch It in the early 1980s, the children's programming you could find on ITV depended on your region's ITV franchise. I did also do a 2 months on follow-up video to my original rant on CITV's closure, but that was clearly a rush job. That's what I get for not getting round to actually doing something until the last minute. To explain things briefly, CITV in the 80s and 90s was a real competitor to children's BBC, often showing programming that had more energy than the stuff shown on the Beebs Kids block. Despite some hiccups here and there, CITV were a good alternative to children's BBC, especially if you didn't have a cable or satellite package. In addition to the shows I mentioned in my original video, other CITV shows I enjoyed from the early to mid-90s include James Bond Jr., Where's Wally, Hurricanes, The Magical Adventures of Mumphy, Rubbish King of the Jumble, Wizardora, and Twinkle the Dream Being. I would have mentioned them in the original video, but I forgot about them. There's only so many things you can think of all at once on the spot. However, because getting Sky shortly after Easter 1996 caused me to ditch CBBC and CITV in favour of Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network and TCC, with Fox Kids launching later that year, I missed out on shows that us Brits could only see on CITV throughout what was left of the 90s, including Blazing Dragons, Road Rovers, Bernard's Watch, Sooty Heights, and the Wombles reboot. I didn't even know of Sooty Heights until I found it on the CITV channel in the late 2000s. It's a good continuation of the Sooty franchise, so it's good that I did get to watch it eventually. I did come across a new Morph series CBBC aired during the late 90s, Morph TV, but I didn't see any of it beyond a brief glimpse I caught of it on one occasion. While I did partially allow CBBC and CITV back into my TV diet in the first half of the 2000s, Cartoon Network continued to be almost all I watched, and even today it's still one of my go-to channels. So while I did get to watch Sonic X a few months before Fox Kids started airing it, I missed out on Don't Eat the Neighbours, Sitting Ducks, and Bounty Hamster. However, When I heard in the mid-2000s that ITV were cutting CITV's hours, I did feel sad, partly because kids' TV continued to be my bread and butter, still is today, but also because I got the feeling that ITV don't care about kids anymore. Which reminds me, kids' TV here in the UK in 2024 is in not a good state. I am not seeing much in the way of new original kids programming outside Sky Kids. Our main few major broadcasters, including the BBC, are hell-bent on making TV internet only, despite internet being something not everyone can afford. I hear governments in recent years have cut funding for broadcasters designated for kids programming, and while CBBC's new look, introduced in March last year, is a big improvement over the horrible 2016 rebrand, I still see almost all promos for shows tell us to watch them on iPlayer without even acknowledging the channel itself. Also, remember the days when setting up your new TV didn't require much work, just simply tuning it in and away you go? Now, when you buy a new TV, you have to log in to 10 different accounts, creating any you don't already have, enter the passwords to your Wi-Fi, which you either know off by heart or don't, and I'm worried these accounts are being used to spy on us, analyse what we watch, and in the future, seize control of our lives. Going back specifically to ITV, I have no idea what has happened to them from the 2000s onwards. Yes, I know the 1990 Broadcasting Act has allowed Carlton and Granada to join forces in abolishing region-specific ITV, and the channel's mostly been reliant on game shows, reality shows, and that decades-old street soap ever since. But that's no way to run a channel. If you don't give your viewers a wider variety of programming, they will get bored. Not to mention, we all need to have something to watch, no matter how young. After ITV cut CITV's hours in the mid-2000s, I felt the only way they could prove they do still care about kids programming was to launch a dedicated CITV channel, which in March 2006 they did. But only on Freeview and Telewest. Sky viewers like me didn't get it until 2 months later. However, it turns out the dedicated CITV channel was originally supposed to launch in 2001, 1 year before the BBC launched their standalone CBBC and CBeebies channels, but ITV cutting CITV's budget and other shenanigans meant the CITV channel couldn't happen until 2006. Over the years, the CITV channel prospered, giving us shows like Planet Sketch, the Emu Reboot, Bookaboo, Pat and Stan, Annabelle's Kitchen, a new Sooty series, Adventure Time, Monsuno, Gravity Falls, Digimon Fusion, Nerds and Monsters, Playmobil cartoon Super 4, Oddbods, the Thunderbirds reboot, Fangbone, Robozuna, Mighty Magiswords, Milo Murphy's Law, and a handful of others, as well as giving us reruns of the late 90s Paddington reboot, Bernard's Watch, Sooty Heights, and the early 2000s Sooty Show. But seeing them promote Horrid Henry as their main show for as long as they did was infuriating. Not only is Horrid Henry a show so bad it even makes Peppa Pig look like Infinity Train, but it shows that ITV didn't care enough about kids programming to give us much else in the way of shows produced in-house. I know CITV could be better than that. They were better than that. when CITV was an after-school block on the main ITV channel, they gave us a great variety of shows that really competed with the BBC's children's offering. Yeah, cartoons were almost all I cared about, yet I did know about shows like Woof and Mike and Angelo, which I heard in later years are remembered fondly, but I wasn't big on live action programming. Cartoons were, and still are, my bread and butter when it comes to TV and film. Surprisingly, despite CITV also having a show, best described as Casualty for Kids, titled Children's Ward, I didn't know about it until CITV's Old School Weekend in 2013. Maybe I didn't know about that one because I found myself watching more children's BBC than CITV around the halfway point of the decade. I didn't know about Bernard's Watch until I found reruns of it in late 2009 because, like I said before, I ditched the basic 4 channels in 1996 because we got Sky and I was able to have Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon be my go-to channels. Did I just mention the Old School Weekend CITV had in January 2013? One thing I felt is largely missing from kids' TV here in the UK, particularly since, shortly into the 2000s, is reruns of older kids' shows from the 80s and 90s. I don't want CBBC's current schedule to suddenly be chock-a-block with reruns of kids' shows from the BBC's past, but I would like to see more regular reruns of older kids' shows across many channels. Not too many, but enough so us 80s and 90s kids can indulge in nostalgia more easily. There was one glimmer of hope in the 2000s. One channel, Pop, which launched not long into the decade, started off as a channel mostly of reruns of cartoons from the 90s. They had former CBBC staple Noah's Island, former Nickelodeon staple Santo Bagito, and some other stuff I can't quite put my finger on, but for me it was when they started airing Deke's Sonic the Hedgehog cartoons in 2004, except Underground, which didn't arrive on the channel until 2006, that really put Pop on the map for me. On closer inspection, it turned out they also had Deke's Mario 3 and World cartoons, stop-motion series Bump in the Night, The American Dennis the Menace, and former Nickelodeon staples Stickin' Around, just to name a few. Sure, they were most likely airing those because they were a new channel with little resources, and airing those shows because they could get them without breaking the bank. But not only could 2000s kids discover them, older viewers who loved those shows when they were younger had the chance to re-enjoy them. I say how good it is to have reruns of older shows because in January 2013, CITV celebrated their 30th anniversary with an old school weekend, 2 days of reruns of CITV shows from the 80s, 90s and 2000s. The schedule included Count Duckula, Danger Mouse, Wizardora, Funhouse, Puddle Lane, Rosie and Jim, Mike and Angelo, the reboot of The Tomorrow People. It was so good despite only lasting 2 days. The reruns of Rosie and Jim and Danger Mouse as part of that weekend actually went on to be the channel's 2 most watched shows throughout its life up to that point, beating Horrid Henry. Take that, you whiny, misbehaving bastard! Similarly, to celebrate their 100th anniversary in 2022, the BBC added a few reruns of their old kids' shows to BBC4's Sunday lineup, including Bagpuss, Ivor the Engine, Why Don't You, and Chucklevision. This is the sort of stuff we need more of. Come 2023, I was expecting CITV to do something special for their 40th anniversary, but sadly it wasn't even acknowledged. Instead, we were told in March the channel would be shutting down. It shut down in September. A new kids offshoot of their ITVX streaming service became their main kids offering, and to try and make it look like they care more about kids than they actually do, they launched a CITV block on ITV2. Sorry, but you can't hide it. You actually do not care about kids, ITV. The CITV block on ITV2, using Easter idents in September, was the first sign they don't care. Despite being 5 AM to 9 AM at first, they lost an hour shortly after, making it now 6 AM to 9 AM. The block almost entirely consists of Warner Brothers shows, and they even end the block with a movie every Saturday and Sunday now, most likely because they can't be bothered to come up with a proper, fully fledged schedule. Since the launch of ITVX Kids, were any new shows added to that? I haven't checked for reasons I will explain later. To make matters worse, a few months ago, ITV's preschool block, Little B, ended, meaning there's even less kids stuff available from ITV for those without the internet. Not to mention, it answers the question as to why more recent Little B editions, Bugs Bunny Builders and Batwheels, have been airing on ITV2's CITV block since. Like I said before, kids TV here in Britain is suffering. There are now fewer kids channels than there were at the start of the decade. The ban on junk food advertising dating back to 2006 has not reduced obesity, but has instead caused broadcasters to have less money to spend on kids programming. And now, unless you have internet access, a requirement to watch BBC iPlayer and ITVX, you're mostly out of luck. Yes, I am aware that junk food advertising will be banned from all television before 9 PM starting October next year. Again, I feel that will do nothing to end obesity, and it will only leave broadcasters with less money to spend on programming. I do at the same time feel that the occasional treat is perfectly fine as part of a balanced diet. Children need to know that. Don't let yourself get fat, but don't cut out candy or fast food entirely. I'm not saying kids' TV in Britain today is all bad. Retro channel Rewind TV launched not long ago, and they have reruns of Wurzel Gummidge, and they even air Rhubarb some Sundays. Tiny Pop returned to Sky and Freeview just over a week and a half ago, and despite the shit going on at Warner Brothers Discovery, Cartoon Network, Boomerang and Cartoonito are still making an effort to give us new shows. I really like the new Wind in the Willows cartoon, Toad and Friends, and I look forward to seeing what that Irish cartoon, Silly Sundays, what Cartoonito will be airing soon, has to offer. I know a lot of broadcasters are making plans for an all-online future. The BBC have been making plans to go online only. Serious symptoms of MTV syndrome. Channel 4 renamed their All 4 catch-up service just Channel 4, and next year, both Channel 5 and My 5 will become just 5. But this still shuts out a lot of viewers, and I hear internet speeds in a lot of properties here in Britain are insufficient for streaming. Also, as a long-time Sky viewer, I am disheartened to hear that Sky might be closing their satellite TV service in late 2028, if not 2029. Their satellite contract ends in late 2028, and the satellites carrying Sky and Freesat channels are expected to go out of service in 2029. I know Sky are pushing their streaming offerings, Sky Glass and Sky Stream, but at the same time, they've been closing standard definition channels on their satellite service and telling viewers still using non-HD boxes to upgrade to Sky Q. Do they really want to cut off viewers who upgrade from their SD Sky boxes to Sky Q just 4 years after they get their new boxes? Not to mention, TV being online only puts a lot of shows, movies and live events in danger of becoming lost media. A big worry I have with Sky Sports Plus, which I hear some sports will only be available via the streaming outlet of. I also don't want to have to be dependent on my iPhone and iPad all the time. I largely use them nowadays to track the shit the Tories have been doing to us, which the newly elected Starmer government are continuing and making worse, but at the same time, I'm worried what AI will do once it gets into my iPhone and iPad when iOS 18 arrives soon. It's why I plan to have my Neo Geo Pocket, once I get its capacitors replaced, be my main alarm clock again, just as it was when I was in secondary school. Speaking of Sky Sports, I hear the Liberal Democrats want our current government to abolish the paywall Premier League soccer games are currently behind. I don't know how successful this plea will be in the short term, but it would be great to see more of the beautiful game made available to the whole United Kingdom. Link in the description. Shows possibly becoming lost media is one of my biggest issues with ITV making most of their kids offering online only. It not only shuts out viewers whose internet is insufficient for streaming, and those who have no internet access at all, it puts shows in danger of becoming lost media, as there's no easy way to preserve them. Your favourite show might be on ITVX now, but will it still be there in 6 years' time? Don't get me started on the situation regarding Netflix, Warner Brothers Discovery and Final Space. VHS may not have been the most reliable technology in history, but the ability to record programming at the touch of a button onto a tape you can watch on more than one machine has resulted in the preservation of so much 80s, 90s and early 2000s content that we might otherwise have never gotten to see again. I know the BBC announced this decade plans to close the CBBC channel next year, but I thought I heard more recently that they will not close it after all. I hope that's true. I know they are spending less on kids programming, but if they at least keep the CBBC channel on the air, that will be something, especially as Pop, Tiny Pop and Pop Max are no longer available on Freesat, despite still being available on Sky. Plus, I heard that ITV's ITVX streaming service has been losing paying subscribers. Hope that causes them to consider putting CITV back on TV as a full-time channel. I see no point in ITVB. A lot of what they air might as well be on ITV2. Not only that, but the launch of the linear Sky Kids channel last year and Tiny Pop's recent return to Sky and Freeview after a 5-month absence only strengthen the case for more kids programming on terrestrial and satellite television. Yes, I am aware of that new online Freeview replacement Freely, but that again shows no regard for viewers who have no means of using the internet at home? Well, until ITV reconsider their current output, we need to boycott them outright. Don't watch any of their channels, don't visit any of their websites, don't watch anything on ITVX. Yes, this is why I have not been checking what's available to stream on ITVX Kids, because if I did, it would strengthen their argument for having shut down CITV. Furthermore, because all ITV channels switched over for the old dead Queen's funeral 2 years ago, will they do the same when Old Sausage Fingers kicks the bucket? Will they also block off all non-relevant programming on ITVX for the day? Also, with more scandals coming out, ruining the already bad reputation of our new government, led by the kid starver himself, Keir Starmer, we need to use this to end the rigged political system we have and win a Britain that works for everyone. As part of this rebuilt Britain, we need a whole new broadcasting act that bans political bias from our news, mandates that there be more region-specific channels, increases funding for kids programming, and allows crisp, chocolate, etc. advertising back onto kids' TV. Before I forget, this MeTV Toons channel over in the US, which shows old Warner Brothers, Hanna-Barbera, etc. cartoons, sounds exactly like what free TV all over the world needs. And despite major broadcasters like the BBC and ITV pushing for a future where TV is online only, no doubt why both Channel 5 and My5 are rebranding as 5 next year, we do have a chance to keep TV available over the air thanks to the Broadcast 2040 Plus campaign, whose website URL I've included in the description. ITV, if you don't care how we feel about your dumbass decision to close both the CITV channel and Little B, making only a few crumbs of your kids' offering available on linear TV, why should we care about how you feel?